indoor studio chalkboard project was such a success that we now need to make one for the outside at Olas Yoga. Question number one is how big, and if it can fit on this piece of scrap wood that we already have, then that saves a lot of time and effort. And the boss says yes. Okay. So this should be a pretty straightforward project. We're going to take this scrap piece of wood that was left over from the last chalkboard that we built. We're going to take these 1x4s and miter the ends, build a frame around it, rabbet the backside with the router, glue it all up, paint it, and it should be done in a couple hours. Alright, step one complete. We got the frame. Now we are going to notch a rabbet 1/2 inch deep and 1/2 inch wide all around the inside. I kind of eyeballed the depth. Now I'm going to make a test pass. Alright, that's pretty good. So it's not quite 1/2 inch deep, a little bit more than 1/4 inch, which is the thickness of the plywood. Clamp it down, and here we go. With the rabbet cut around the edge, the plywood piece will sit inside there just like that. To attach the mitered corners, we're going to use this Craig pocket jig. Alright, ready to glue this up, which I think is actually the trickiest part, because making 90-degree angles and having them come out perfectly is never easy. So fill the glue. One down and 3 to go. Well, that came out pretty good. So while this dries, we can start painting the plywood. So next step is to prime the plywood, and I'm going to use some of this Kills primer, probably 2 coats of that. So we can see there's a little gap in one of the corners here, and I'm just going to use a little bit of this wood putty. It goes on purple and then it dries wood color, so you know it's done. And this way I can just sand it flush and you won't see it when the whole thing's sanded. Now that the frame is dry, you can sand the corners and give everything a final sanding before we stain it. I'm happy with how these corners came out. Next, I'll wipe on a little bit of this wood stain around the frame. primer is dry, so now the fun part, we put on the chalkboard paint. Our last finishing stage before assembly is to put a coat of polyurethane on the frame. The frame has 2 coats of polyurethane on it now, and I gave the chalkboard 3 coats of chalkboard paint, so now we're ready for some assembly. I'm going to flip this over and screw it in place and add a little bit of glue before I do that. A little bead of wood glue around the outside. And here goes the panel into the rabbet. And then finally, I'm going to use these little 1/2-inch screws to hold it in place. Flipped it over, and there's just a little bit of glue that will seep through, and just wipe that up, and there's our final product.